Haribo, greetings, spiritual warriors. Welcome to our Krishna.com live spiritual warriorship classes, where we read from books of His Holiness Pachitirtha Swami, spiritual warrior, and hopefully one day we'll start going into his reflection books. He has, 16, 17 books. Oh, and I just got word from the D.T. Swami list that Reflections number 6, is it Rasya? Anyway, the last spiritual warrior book that discusses uprights has been
Reflections.
You know it?
It's the Reflections book. He said
Reflections. The Reflections has been translated into Hindi and published in India. And it will be for sale now, I believe, in India. So that's quite exciting. They are planning to translate the spiritual warrior books. So we're fortunate to have these books here and reading and hearing to increase our spiritual consciousness ourselves.
Radha Sunya. It's called Radha Sunya.
Rasa Sunya. Thank you very much. Now, last week we went over the concept of spiritual warriorship, and we were beginning a new adventure in Spiritual Warrior 3. But it's interesting in reading ahead to see how it may go, or I somehow just wasn't feeling satisfied. I'm thinking about how Vyasadeva after writing all those books still wasn't satisfied. Till Narada Muni had to tell him he's done all that writing, but he hasn't put in about serving devotional service to the Lord. But I wasn't quite satisfied. Part of it has to do with my loving to interact face to face with devotees or people who are listening to what I have to say. And the reading, as I did, felt like that kind of activity I would have liked. So I'm saying, okay, I can read and share, because every time I read, I feel he's giving us something to think about, something to practice in our everyday life, and something to grow spiritually. And with that thought in mind, Bhaktitirtha Swami possibly guided me to go to Spiritual Warrior 5. And I did. And I looked at the contents and I saw the chapters we have been through over the period of time. You know that Spiritual Warrior 5 is called Making the Mind Your Best Friend. And he gives us quite a bit in there. And I think we have already done we went through the internal dialogue, the importance of short-term goals, remember an attitude of gratitude. I enjoyed that one. And I think the last one we did from this was the necessity of enthusiasm. So tonight, this will be our new adventure. Chapter 6, Spiritual Warrior 5, Making the Mind Your Best Friend. Chapter 6, entitled The Perfect Escape. And somehow I maybe needed to hear it. So that's where we are tonight. If you've got your Spiritual Warrior 3 out, you can put that aside for now. Please continue reading it. And pull out your Spiritual Warrior 5. If it takes you a minute to go across to the bookshelf and get it. And if you happen not to have it, fantastic book, Making the Mind Your Best Friend. We all need to really learn how to do that because we know what that mind can do to us as we went through, and we have a few more chapters also in Spiritual Warrior 4 where we deal with the enemies of the mind. Remember some of those? We dealt with anger and a number of things. So I went to 5, I opened, I looked, and I came to the perfect escape, and that is where we will begin tonight. Chapter 6, Spiritual Warrior 5, the perfect escape chapter. Now another thing that, I want to say pushed me towards feeling there was some other way I wanted to go, when what we were reading about the choices of humanity and what's really going on out there, it made me feel like, yeah, all of that's going on, but I want to go higher, and reading this, I want to escape, learn how to escape from that without running away, but from a higher consciousness. So let's see how this will go and what we can learn from this. Is there anybody in the chat room right now? Who's there?
Bhuvan, Mohan, and Shruti.
All right, welcome, and thank you for being there. The Perfect Escape chapter begins with a text from Srimad Bhagavatam that states, it's Srimad Bhagavatam 1, chapter 16, text 7. Oh, Sutta Goswami, there are those amongst men who desire freedom from death and get eternal life. They escape the slaughtering process by calling the controller of death Yamaraj. Now I didn't quite understand that, so thank goodness for Vedabase. I went to the purport of this particular verse, and I'm going to share it with you, because whatever we're being given, I feel there are no accidents, no coincidences, and if we hear it and can accept it, then our process of growth improves. The purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada states, the living entity, as he develops from lower animal life to a higher human being and gradually to higher intelligence, becomes anxious to get free from the clutches of death. Modern scientists try to avoid death by physiochemical advancement of knowledge. But alas, the controller of death, Yamaraj, is so cruel that he does not spare even the very life of the scientist himself. The scientist who puts forward the theory of stopping death by advancement of scientific knowledge becomes himself a victim of death when he is called by Yamaraj. Excuse me 1 minute. Do you want more to eat? There's some on a plate there. You can have it. I can't.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Excuse me, some things need to be said. The scientist who puts forward the theory of stopping death by advancement of scientific knowledge becomes himself a victim of death when he is called by Yamaraj. What to speak of stopping death? No one can enhance the short period of life even by a fraction of a moment. The only hope of suspending the cruel, slaughtering process of Yamaraj is to call him to hear and chant the holy name of the Lord. That's what that meant, process by calling them. Because I was saying, what would you want to call him for? But you call him to hear and chant the holy name of the Lord. Why? Because Yamaraj is a great devotee of the Lord. And he likes to be invited to kirtans and sacrifices by the pure devotees who are constantly engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Thus, the great sages, headed by Saunaka and others, invited Yamaraj to attend the sacrifice performed at Naimisharanya. This was good for those who did not want to die. So that kind of took that verse a little further and helped in understanding what that meant. So he tells us that the dream of every prisoner confined to a life of imprisonment is to make a perfect escape. Remember the movies? They would be plotting, heads all down, making signs and things. But they're in prison. They want out. And we as prisoners confined by the material body, we also want to escape from the material prison when it offers nothing but limitation and restrictions. We understand the nature of the material world from the Bhagavad Gita, which lucidly explains our miserable position. And here again he quotes from a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text 16, Krishna speaking says, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all of places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. He tells us, our author, that by understanding the depth of our imprisonment, how can we foolishly try to make ourselves comfortable in this realm? We live in a place of misery in which we find danger at every step. Padam padam yad vipadam na tesam. Duality, pain, madness, and illusion inevitably affect each of us to varying degrees, as no one in this world is exempt from their jurisdiction. The material body is basically a bad bargain. You've heard that expression that Bali Maharaj and I at Gita Nagari, we were like the older ones there. And how you doing, Bali? Oh, I'm making the best of a bad bargain. Because really, the material body is basically a bad bargain. The mere fact that we have a body means that we have turned our backs on Krishna's eternal pastimes. It means conflict and confusion no matter where we reside in these universes, from the highest planet to the lowest. Krishna is telling us, can't escape. You need to escape if you want to get to his abode. This reminds me of hearing a class some time ago in Gita Nagari that sent me on a search. Whatever the speaker said, I was able to follow it, and I went trying to find it today. And it's in Canto 12. And I just remember I went looking because whatever he said, I asked and he referred me. And it had to do with Brahma's lifetime. And you know how that's broken down, and I don't remember to quote it. His days is this long, his nights are this long and all. But what I got, it was like a light bulb went off that this soul that I am has been going around those millions of years, whatever it was. And because I am in this body, here still in a human body, I've been still going around. But I'm now in a philosophy, hearing a philosophy and a teaching that tells me that that cycle can be stopped. You understand? All of us, we're in a human body. We don't know how many millions it is. And because it had to do with Brahma's annihilation, when he goes to sleep, we all go. And when he wakes up, we all come back and he puts us in the proper bodies. So that made me want to go a little deeper in the study. How? So I guess I was beginning to plan, looking for direction for an escape. Bhaktivedanta Swami states, whether we have the highest and most opulent type of body in the world, or live in the most degraded condition, the Lord tells us beyond a doubt that either place results in misery. He did not say that in these places you will only experience temporary setbacks, limited happiness, minimal pleasures, or small disturbances. He declares that they are all places of misery. Now there's a distinct difference between limitations and miseries. A person subjected to various limitations can still experience some sort of stimulation. But a person submerged in an ocean of misery will not find any pleasure at all. The Lord informs us that whatever type of cell or prison suit we temporarily occupy, we should expect complete misery. Hopefully, by understanding this basic truth, we can eventually rise above the entrapment by addressing the enemies of the mind. So you see, he's giving us direction, what to look for, and not to get so comfortable in this bad bargain. Now, the enemies, such as lust, anger, depression, illusion, greed, and so on constantly beat us up. But should this surprise us? Krishna distinctly warns us that the material world will inevitably cause us all types of sufferings. But our craziness manifests when we try to escape by taking shelter of that very same enemy. If someone is harshly beating and exploiting you, how can you find relief? By taking shelter of the source of your attack. Even though the thought of it sounds absurd, we sometimes do this every day by taking shelter of those exact situations that cause us more pain. But people often make irrational choices while suffering in pain and agony. If we feel some disturbance in our spiritual life and try to solve the problem by some intoxications or turning to other sinful activities, we are actually taking shelter of the exact sin that caused our imprisonment in the first place. Rebelling against the laws of God is the foundation of our suffering. But many of us avoid this basic truth and still continue to wonder why we suffer from day to day. He asked a couple of questions, which reminds me, no questions tonight for class. I don't know how you all did with the questions I gave you last week. Don't throw them away, because we will be getting back to that chapter at some point. But he's asking, why do some spiritualists feel so unhappy although engaged in devotional service in a devotional community? Why are we not experiencing what we often read about in the scriptures? He says, let us now analyze the difference between anxiety and excitement, because it can help us answer these questions, ones we just read. Now, from our previous discussion on enthusiasm, we can understand how it distinctly affects our ability to succeed in spiritual life and make the perfect escape. Therefore, let us understand enthusiasm along with its opposite, anxiety. In both cases, we see tremendous exertion of the mind as well as the body. Our emotions are either running intensely towards a goal or desperately trying to avoid a negative outcome. Now, although both emotions involve great intensity and focused energy, there's definitely a difference. And I'm sure you'll agree with that even before he gives a definition and an analysis. The dictionary definition of anxiety states, a painful or apprehensive uneasiness of mind, usually over an impending or anticipated ill, or fearful concern or interest. And then there's a longer definition, an abnormal and overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear, often marked by physiological signs as sweating, tension, increased pulse, by doubt concerning the reality and nature of the threat, and by self-doubts about one's capacity to cope with it. That's the dictionary. Bhakti Tirtha Swami says, anxiety is perpetuated by fear, and excitement is perpetuated by hope. He made that very simple, right? Dictionary kind of draws it out a little more. Both cases involve a type of anticipation, but one is negative, the other is positive. You get that? We're looking at anxiety versus excitement. And we're looking at basically our spiritual life and our spiritual life, but our everyday life. A person is either trying to avoid a certain outcome or is anticipating the future. And that can definitely bring anxiety, because we cannot see the future. The Lord does. And that's why it's good if we depend on Him, because He sets things up so that usually He's preparing us for what we will meet in the future. But it's our energy and consciousness sometimes, and He'll tell us here, that brings about that, and then the Lord, He just steps back for a while till you get it. But He says, even when someone suffers from severe depression, we often see them running away from what they need the most. They are trying to escape from the fact that they have no excitement in their lives by shutting down emotionally, or they try to escape the anxiety by narcoticizing themselves through work, intoxication, or excessive sex life. Furthermore, by focusing too much on what we want to avoid, we often draw that exact situation closer to ourselves. Have you ever, been around somebody close to you, and they're just saying, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and you're maybe saying, well, you don't need to think that way. It's a possibility. It won't happen, and you could do this. Oh, no. And what happens? What they were talking about, it happens, and what are the first thing they say? I told you it would happen. But what he's telling us here, by focusing too much on what we want to avoid, we often draw that exact situation closer to ourselves. The mind, yes.
There's a question.
Okay.
By Edgar.
Edgar. Welcome, Edgar.
It says, Hare Krishna, Mother and Johnny, I have a question. I was taught there is anxiety in the spiritual world also, but it is of a different nature. In the material world, we become anxious for our own well-being, whereas in the spiritual world, there's anxiety about Krishna. For example, I can be anxious about feeling separated from Krishna, like the gopis, or I can be anxious about Krishna's well-being, even though he is factually God, like Nanda and Yashoda.
Okay, wonderful statement. Now, if you're believing that, trusting that, functioning at that level, then the type of anxiety we're talking about may not be a part of your miserable, suffering life. But you're absolutely right. When the focus is on Krishna, he's talking here about situations that we are fearful about, or we're anticipating it not working out for us. That's on the material level. This is on the material level. And apparently you've read and studied and know that, what is it? I remember when I read Vaikuntha, you're rid of anxiety, and I said, oh my God, will I ever get to such a place? So yes, if the focus is on Krishna, the anxiety, there may be some anxiety, but how do I please him more? How do I serve him better? Whereas here in the material suffering we're talking about right now, it's about ourselves. You're absolutely right. Thank you for that input. So he's saying that the mind does not always understand that we want to avoid a certain outcome. Rather, it latches onto the object of constant meditation. So, what are you spending your time and energy thinking about? That's the important thing. If we constantly dwell on the possible negative outcomes, got that? If we constantly dwell on the possible negative outcomes, we will create more of that in the future. Therefore, by focusing with excitement on the positive, we can help create a positive future experiences. And that means you may not see it at that moment happening, but you focus your attention on that. And again, that the mind does not always understand we want to avoid, but if it keeps getting the same message it takes us, that's what you really want. Imagine putting fuel on a fire to create an even greater fire. Excitement or anxiety builds up tremendous energy that has to go somewhere. We either build up a mission and a vision that can lead to great empowerment, or we focus so much energy in running away, which in turn creates that negative situation anyhow. In either case, an activity is being harnessed in some way, either negative or positive. Any more comment or question? Okay. Remember a time in which you felt intense anxiety, and think of how it challenged not only your mind but your body as well in a serious way. Think about that. I can definitely think about that and remember when 2003 I think it was, I was taking the Bhakti Sastra course, in Philadelphia. Now, I was excited about taking the course, and when I began, I was excited about getting deeper into the Bhagavad Gita verse by verse and having a teacher and explain and tell stories. But consequence of taking a course is that there are exams to see if you got it. Now, I don't know if it was from younger years in school, but that whole thing about taking an exam made me anxious. Other people talk about it. I talk about myself. And we had to learn slokas and things, and I was practicing the slokas. Well, I don't know. It was a 3-month course. And the test, every week we had a test on what we had gone over. But my anxiety began to build up so that it kind of covered the excitement that I wanted to feel. I felt little on some level. And my dears, I became so anxious till I went into a shortness of breath so bad they had to call the ambulance and take me to the hospital. So this is what he's saying, that when he asked this question, remember a time in which you felt intense anxiety, and think of how it challenged not only your mind but your body as well in a serious way. I can answer, I remember a time. And I don't know if you all are honest with yourself and think. Now he says, imagine an extreme case in which a vicious dog is chasing you down the street. You could feel extreme anxiety in your endeavor to avoid the attack. Compare that type of incident to a time in which you felt excited due to the anticipation of a pleasant event. In both cases, the mind goes through all kinds of gymnastics. And that's why this book is called Making the Mind Your Best Friend. He's showing us how we're going to move out of that. But the mind goes through all kinds of gymnastics, which can even lead to a response by the physical body. This is a significant issue as we look at the conception of escape and plan for our own escape. We want to examine our daily lives because we are always mad after some goal, either material or spiritual. Are you mad about a spiritual goal? Think about that. This material world, it can pull our minds. So, we are either mad after sense gratification, or we are mad after spiritual ecstasy. Think of your own ups and downs and the kind of madness involved in eagerness and euphoria. Think of the madness that ensues when we are captured by lust, frustration, gloom, and depression. Our consciousness becomes so lazy and morbid, sometimes even to the point of desiring death. A perfect escape implies tremendous plotting, scheming, and planning. We sometimes hear of a person committing the perfect crime, which indicates that their that they executed the act in such a precise way that they completely avoid detection. And I can't remember any names of movies, but in reading this and thinking, when I used to go to the movies way back, there was always these, prison movies or something, and the prisoners are planning the perfect escape. So it's a fact that when you're in prison, you want out. And there has to be some plotting and scheming and planning for that. So let's see how he's going to help us. He says that we want to have a clear vision and understand the mission. By focusing on the goal, we can gain some empowerment to act upon that vision. Wherever we see success, we will surely see a vision, which then leads to a mission. When we see failure, there is either a lack of vision or a lack of expertise and excitement to follow through. Now, when our material madness and anxiety decrease and we have more excitement about what we can experience, the same emotional buildup will go in a positive direction, even though we are in this conditioned state. Doesn't that sound helpful? You don't give up. There's always a way. We will then harness the energy with a mission and a vision in terms of the goal. We realize our position as a prisoner stuck in a high or low position of wealth, poverty, beauty, sickness, knowledge, ignorance. Stuck. We're stuck and want to transcend. Krishna tells Arjuna to transcend and rise above all the gunas or ropes of material nature. You put that candle out, please. In right here. Sorry, I had to take care of something. And this is what Krishna tells Arjuna. The Vedas deal, just blow it out. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Oh, Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes. Do devotees, practitioners, whoever is out there, guests, loved ones, read your Bhagavad Gita. If you aren't reading it on a regular basis, try. Read it on a regular basis. And know this is, you're getting instructions from Krishna himself. And then you can set your goal and have your vision and know what your mission is. And if you follow that, you will see wonderful changes in your lives and things going. He tells and continues in this verse to Arjuna, be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain, safety, and be established in the self. That's Bhagavad Gita 2:45. And what I wanted to do is just see a taste of what Prabhupada had to say on that purport. 2:45. Don't need to do the whole thing, but Prabhupada starts off by saying, All material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive results, which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activity to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. So Arjuna, as a student and friend of Krishna, is advised to rise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy, where in the beginning there are Brahma Janasha, or questions on the supreme transcendence. All living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. For them, the Lord, after creation of the material world, gave the Vedic wisdom advising how to live and get rid of material entanglement. So that's why I'm reminding you to read your Bhagavad Gita, and you may be beyond that and read it. You can always reread it. And of course, if you're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and then you read Bhakti Tirtha Swami's books, who just sort of show you something you may have missed. So the Vedas prescribe a process of gradual elevation. But what did Krishna tell Arjuna? To go beyond that. So Krishna consciousness enables one to overcome material dualities. So here we're seeing Krishna does not even want us to get back in sattva guna or the mode of goodness. Even in the more luxurious prison, the inmate still has limitations and misery. Do we want to plan for an escape that leads to more imprisonments? Or do we agitate the mind to plan for a real escape that will lead to transcendence? And I think I'm going to stop there for the night. Are there any comments, questions? That's a good question. You can meditate on that for the week. Oh, Bhakti Tirtha Swami. Do we want to plan for an escape that leads to more imprisonment? Or do we agitate the mind to plan for a real escape that will lead to transcendence? Okay? Work with that. We'll discuss, and hopefully next week you'll have some comments or some sharing of some action you may have taken, some understanding you may have come to as we move towards the perfect escape. Because Bhakti Tirtha Swami is taking us there. But we have to do introspection sometimes. So, any questions, comments? Any additional people in the chat?
Carol.
Who?
Carol.
Carol. Hi, Carol. Welcome.
Guru Mohan says Thank you for another excellent class.
Who said?
Bhuvan Mohan.
Oh, bless his heart. Okay. So begin planning your perfect escape, huh? Of course, the simplest thing is to focus on your chanting, because they say at that moment you call the Lord's name and but think about how your life is now, where you are now, because as he's saying, in this material world, material energy, but look for the excitement and see the differences, how you can differentiate the anxiety and why, and the excitement and why not. Okay? So, any comments or anybody have anything else to say?
Edgar and Shruti says, please help them escape. And Carol says, perfect escape sounds good.
Oh, she came late. Okay. Spiritual Warrior 5, Carol, I'm in. Making the mind your best friend. And we're in chapter 6, entitled The Perfect Escape. So I keep encouraging you to try and get these books of Bhakti-tirtha Swami. So you can keep up with me, or when you get excited, you can read ahead, and you can put these concepts and techniques into place in your daily life. And you will definitely see changes. All right? So I hope for a good report next week. I thank you all for coming, being here, hearing, and I bid you, I see, are you typing? Somebody saying something before I close? Yes?
Carol says, I'm not trying to do this effect, but lately when things seem sad, ugly, chanting and listening to Srila Prabhupada and everything else just falls away.
Falls away. Yeah, that can happen. Because as we said earlier with how the mind works, if we are focusing on that, what is it she said, sadness and what else?
Ugliness.
And ugliness, unless we make a conscious effort by hearing the scriptures or reading the sastras or something positive, the mind will grasp that. He just described it to us so nicely. By focusing too much on what we want to avoid, we often draw that to us, because the mind does not always understand that we want to avoid a certain outcome. It latches onto the object of our constant meditation. So if we constantly dwell on the possible negative outcomes, we will create more in the future. So yes, that shows how powerful the mind is and where your energy is going. But you are conscious that it's going there. You are conscious of the feelings at that moment. You then, I say, and Guru has said in the qualities of a spirit, you talk to the mind, you tell it, stop that nonsense, I'm not accepting that. This is what I'm accepting. And then you read a prayer, you read the scripture, grab your Bhagavad Gita, open it and see what Krishna is saying to Arjuna, and you start feeding that positive, spiritual affirmation mantra, if you will, and finally the mind will get the message. Okay? So we're accountable and responsible. We must be. Can't let the mind run away. This is what the whole thing we hear in scripture about, mastering the mind. Okay, dear? So yes, we're in the material world. We just went through all of that in the beginning of this chapter. This material world, a material body, means misery and suffering. But we can turn that around, even while in this body. So try that, Carol. You tell that mind, stop at this. I'm not going to dwell on this any longer. I'm going to now dwell on this. And you read a verse. When just even the verses that I read today. Okay? Or you try to get at least to the mode of goodness. You read, what is that, chapter 14? The modes of material nature. And just, you take that into account. Okay, dear? I wish you all the best. But you just do it. And you've been hearing from Bhakti Tirtha Swami on so many levels. So many techniques and technologies. Don't let them go to waste. If you make notes, go back and check your notes. If you have the book, read what he says and then put it into practice in your daily life. And those moments may come just to challenge you to see if you are serious about higher consciousness. Okay, dear? Try that. And we'll see how you do next week. But don't let the mind take you places you don't want to go. You just tell it, stop that. You're going to now hear the holy name. Or you're now going to hear from Srila Prabhupada. Okay? Or you're going to hear from Krishna, and then you read what Krishna is saying, you call his name. Keep calling his name. The mind will get the message sooner or later. Okay? I wish you the best. Anything else?
Edgar says, I literally just witnessed that before this lecture. I put on some bhajans and read the Gita. So blissful.
Okay, it is blissful. And of course, in the material world, it doesn't always last, but you got to keep at it. Thank you for sharing that, Edgar. Okay, that's it. Okay, devotees, friends, well-wishers, thank you for being here. Krishna bless you. Continue studying, reading, and planning the perfect escape. This will get more exciting as we move along. Hare Krishna.